Hi everyone, welcome. Well, normally I'm on that side of the table, but on this occasion I'm over on this side, just so I could pivot the camera to be over the bucket once we get to feeding, but I figured really quick I would show you what I've got going on here. These are the leaves of radishes, and this is some bread here, and I was going to call it a starchy, delicious feast, but I don't know about how much starch there is in this stuff, because it's actually walnut bread. So I don't know if that just means there's some walnut in there, but also some regular flour and wheat, so maybe there is some starchy goodness to it. And as you can see, it's resting in some moisture to help moisten it, because it's pretty much rock hard, and maybe it was already rock hard when it was purchased because it's been discounted pretty heavily, 50% off. So why don't we pivot, as I mentioned earlier, and get the camera face down into bucket number 1, so we can proceed with getting these little guys fed. In most cases, I don't feed on such a short interval as 10 days between feedings, but that's kind of been the trend in a number of my systems lately because I'm just kind of overstocked right now. I got so much stuff going on in my refrigerator as far as foods that have been stuck in the freezer with the intention of giving it to the worms that I feel like I've really got to press on and get back into some systems that might not even be really due for another feeding yet, just to see if I can reduce the amount of stuff I've got in storage. So here, 10 days ago, we gave them a banana peel, some cantaloupe rinds, and a really large quantity of bedding. It was kind of by mistake, because when I grabbed the handful of bedding that we used, it just sort of stuck to each other and came out of the storage container that I've got my prepared bedding in this big massive wad, and it seemed like a shame to put some of it back. I figured, you know what, why don't we just give it to them? So my expectation here is that we're going to find a fairly large quantity of bedding in the system and not have to add any today. So we'll see what we see when we get there. I've been kind of rummaging around the edges rather than digging down into the middle, which is where we fed. I figured just try to aerate a little bit and inspect before we get down to the business of giving them their food today. I must say the material in this system looks really, really nice. It's just maturing so nicely. At 228 days of age, these buckets are definitely getting up there as far as seniority. And it does make me wonder if perhaps one of these days it might be time to getting them, to start getting them geared up for harvest and moving the worms on to a new location. So down here in the middle was where we plopped in that large handful of prepared bedding. I'm already seeing signs of the last feeding, such as the banana peel they got, which is right here. And I did see a little chunk of cantaloupe rind, nibbled clean of all the melon, only the outer skin of the rind remains. And here is some of the leftover prepared bedding, of which, as I mentioned earlier, they received quite a bit. And it does seem like the worms are very content to be in this stuff. It looks like a pretty cozy spot. Even when we first opened up the container, right beneath that little piece of bubble wrap covering things up in here, it seemed like there was a lot of castings material. We didn't really observe many worms hanging out right there, but perhaps that's because I bought the systems out onto the bench and the bright lights have been shining overhead for a moment or two, so perhaps if there were any worms right out on the surface, they might have retreated down into the bedding due to the bright lights being uncomfortable for them to be in. So it does seem to me like getting these systems geared up for harvest one of these days soon might be a good idea. I'm just going to see if I can burrow just a little bit deeper down into the middle, because I'm looking at the foods we've got for them, and it does seem like quite a bit. I mean, when I lift the radish leaves, they're so light and airy. There just doesn't seem to be a whole lot there, but those chunks of bread, especially now that they're soaked full of water, do seem like they're pretty good in size and weight, and they're kind of swelling up from sucking in all the water I placed them into about a half hour ago to see if I can soften them up. It was kind of nice that I was able to get my little jackknife out and cut them in half and then rest them back into the remaining water to suck up what remains and to get moistened through and through. But I'll tell you, I really don't feel like we encountered as much bedding down here as I thought we would. There was some, obviously, and some of it was maybe clumped together, and there's stuff all over the place. Maybe it just blended in with the surrounding materials, and that's why it appeared to me as if not so much was in here. But at 228 days of age, that puts these systems, well, let me see. I did look at my spreadsheet earlier, so if I'm remembering correctly, the longest period of time that I ran systems in these buckets was 292 days. So we're still a couple months away from reaching that here for sure, but it was never my intention to go that long in these buckets. So I do wonder if perhaps this would be a good time to start withholding the application of bedding. I think we might have even mentioned the concept of withholding bedding here in future check-ins. And I think that's probably what we're going to end up doing here. I can feel a little section of this bread here in the middle that's still hard, did not get dampened. But for the most part, this stuff did suck in moisture, and only this little piece right here still feels hard. So that's just fine. I think it's going to suck in moisture now that it's been broken up. And I sure hope the worms like this stuff. I mean, I have noticed recently that some of the breads and other baked goods that I've been putting into the worm bins have been fairly popular. And I expect that this stuff will be the same. So here's the radish leaves. It's a pretty generous feeding, I must say. Let's just make sure we, oh, look at that. Looks like we've got the butt end of a head of romaine lettuce here, and perhaps even some leaves of lettuce too. So it seems like some stuff other than radish leaves snuck in here. So it looks like bucket number 1 is going to get the butt end of the romaine lettuce, and perhaps these last few chunks of the romaine lettuce could be saved for bucket number 2. And I think right here we probably got about half of what we came down here with as far as frozen leafy matter. So why don't we leave the feeding at that. And, oops, I wondered what that was. It was just a worm. So that to me looks like a pretty nice, generous feeding. And here's some of the leftovers, banana peel, other things that they were fed last time. And now we're starting to see more and more leftover scraps of the bedding they got last time. We've talked about possibly transferring the contents of these buckets into bins at some point in the near future, just so we can get better access to all the material. You saw how tricky it was to explore down deep. There's only so far you can go before the sides that you've piled up on both edges start to collapse in on you, and then you can really only get a brief glimpse of what's down low. And not only that, but if we wanted these systems to start evaporating and losing some of their moisture content, it might be a little bit easier if we had a little bit more surface area exposed to the air for evaporation and drying. So let's get bucket number 1 covered. We can move on to bucket number 2. These systems, other than the period of time in the beginning between days 51 and 100, when this system here, bucket number 2, was set up for a set it and forget it test, both systems have been managed almost identically to one another. But here in the second bucket, we did a little test where we loaded up the bucket pretty much full of leaves and then left it for 7 weeks unattended. We would once in a while just lift off the plastic and peek underneath it to see how things looked. As long as things looked okay, and they always did seem to look okay, we simply covered it right back up and let the set it and forget it trial continue undisturbed. And then on day 100 we brought an end to the set it and forget it test, and we resumed consistent maintenance of the bins. And I do believe that at this point where, you know, at day 228, 128 days after the end of the set it and forget it test, there's very little, if any, signs of the fact that this system was not fed for 7 weeks. Although, you know, that's not completely true, because we did load the system up with leaves, and the leaves qualify as a worm food, not just bedding. So I don't think it's fair to say that they were not fed. They just weren't attended to. They just weren't actively checked in on and didn't have their environment tilled up and aerated. And it was pretty interesting to see how things looked. I actually thought that they would have broken down more of the material that had been placed in here for them over that amount of time, but when we got back in here and decided it was time to get back into treating the two systems equally again, we did find lots and lots of leaves. But like I said, that whole thing ended quite a while ago. So it does seem to me right down even to the level within the two systems that were pretty equal. Here too we're seeing some leftovers of the cantaloupe rind that they received last time. I'm assuming we're going to see a banana peel too, now that we're starting to venture down into the middle of the bucket. Although I've not yet seen the banana peel, although before I was examining a banana stem, so maybe that was part of it. I mean, we don't need to go on a wild goose chase looking for something, but you would think that in a little system like this, finding something like a banana peel would be pretty easy. Sometimes I try to judge the moisture level in these systems relative to each other, and it does seem to me like when I try to pile materials up on the sides the way I'm doing here to gain access to a nice opening in the middle into which we can drop the food, it seems to me like the more moisture there is, the more easily the material allows itself to get stacked up on the sides without crumbling in and, you know, avalanching down into the hole that I'm trying to open up. So it makes me kind of wonder if perhaps here in bucket number 2 we don't have quite as much moisture as we have in bucket number 1, simply because of the fact that I'm struggling to create an opening here into which we could pile today's feeding. I don't know if struggling is the right word, but it's obviously working against me here. Perhaps if we were to bring out a little bit more damp material from down low, it would be more cooperative and allow me to create a little gap into which we could quickly drop today's food before it gets filled in again by the avalanche effect. All the little wormies squirming through the stuff doesn't help either, just destabilizing it all. So why don't we press on here and bring in this other chunk of walnut bread. There's this moisture in here, I don't know. Do we just assume that this system does not have quite as much moisture in it and drop this in? Oops, I dropped a piece of this bread on my bench. Feels to me like here too we've got a little section of this piece of walnut bread that did not really suck any moisture into itself, so I just thought I would try to bust it apart and fragment this thing a little bit better so that the worms can access as much surface area as possible. And then what remains is these radish leaves, which are now starting to thaw out and become a little bit sticky. Let's see if we can get all of it in here for the little wormies to feast on. And the lettuce. Here's chunk of lettuce and another couple chunks of it over here. No bedding, no grit. At this point they're just going to get this feeding, and I am wondering if perhaps I should start contemplating the next steps. I think that was kind of the theme last week too. Not last week, 10 days ago when we last checked in here. Just brainstorming on what's next for these little guys, and I do like the idea of possibly transferring the contents of these systems into everyday bus bins, so that we could more easily gain access to all the material that makes up these systems, and then also possibly benefit from the increased surface area on the top, so that when the time comes to try to let the systems breathe and air out a little bit so they can dry, it will be easier to accomplish. So I don't know. I'm going to give that some more thought. That might be the way we go. But for now, it's kind of up in the air as far as what happens next. I'm definitely interested in hearing what people think. If you've got any ideas on where to take these systems, please leave a comment. Let me know your thoughts. I'm always very interested to hear what the viewers think in terms of what I'm doing here and how well I'm doing. So that's it for the video, everyone. I've got a few things I got to take care of getting cleaned up and put away. But I'm not going to keep you around for that since that's so boring. Before I go really quickly, let me say thank you. Thank you so much for watching. Hopefully you enjoyed the video. If you did, as always, please don't forget to leave me a quick thumbs up before you go. That's always really appreciated. And if you haven't done so already, please also consider subscribing to the channel. That's very much appreciated as well. All right, everyone, have a great day. Thanks for watching. Bye now.